J.C. Bose Trust, and as its secretary, I welcome you all to today's webinar, Integrating Science, Society and Philosophy, Jagadish and Abala with Sister Nivedita. This is the inaugural session, first session of this series. We will have more session later afterwards. Now our learned speakers today are Professor Chandima Saha, first women president of INSA in its long history of 85 years. Very proud to have with us Professor Saha today. And C. Johar Sharkar, our guest of honor, a great proponent of the Trust Mission. Of course, all of you know, maybe because I was requested, I give you a brief idea. Bose, a doyen of Indian science, a scientist 60 years ahead of his time, made during the colonial period epoch-making discoveries in radio science, cosmic unity, plant science, etc., with very meager resources. A scientist, he was not a scientist par excellence. He was a essential polymath, a literature, a connoisseur of fine arts, a man whose genius transcended boundaries. First Indian FRS in 1920, first founder member of National Institute of Science of India, now National Science Academy, INSA. Well, in the last decade of the 19th century and early decades of 20th century, confluence of great minds in India created a new culture, linking science, literature, religion, and philosophy, ushering into the Renaissance that led to transition from the medieval to a modern India. This originated in Bengal and then rolled out all over India. It was within this NSA, a creative synthesis of the best of the East and West took place in science, arts, literature, and culture. In search of a creative philosophy of science, Bose looked for inspiration from India's ancient heritage, ancient wisdom. He could mingle Eastern spirituality, philosophy, Vedanta beliefs within the materialistic Western scientific outlook. His discoveries of basic unity in all forms of life, similarity between the living and the non-living, concept of unity among diversity, lent support to the cosmic unity of all existence. His scientific philosophy was deep-rooted in Upanishad doctrine. Now, a few words about Sister Nivedita. Sister Nivedita, Margaret Noble of Ireland, came to India in 1898, and she became the spiritual daughter of Swamiji then. She was a firm believer of the Vedantic paradigm of universal oneness. Also, she was a friend, philosopher, guide of Sir J.C. Bose, helped him both professionally and financially to sail through his troubled days to achieve his mission, to cement his position in history as the father of modern science in the Indian subcontinent. He did all these things because Vivekananda, she believed that without science, regeneration of India would not be possible. Nivedita also inspired Bose to plan a scientific research institute for his countrymen. Bose founded Bose Institute, Bose Vigyan Mandir in 1917 after Nivedita's death for multidisciplinary research in basic sciences and said, I quote, the institute is the embodiment of our prayer, unquote. Nivedita's contribution to Indian society is immense. Besides science, she took interest and active and passionate interest in promoting Indian history, art, culture, independence movement, education, societal development, especially emancipation of the Indian woman. In the independence movement of India, the period 1902 to 1911, she died in October 1911. Till then, has been rightly marked as the Nivedita era, acknowledging her selfless contribution of a person who gave her all to India. Tagore conferred upon her the title of Lokmata. And she was meditating Uma of the great painter Abanindranath Tagore, who drew Bharat Mata based on the principle inspired by the book, Nivedita's book Mother Kali. Nivedita was a true champion of India, its finest minds, its achievements, its culture. Her contribution to the Indian society is immense. Now, a few words about Lady Bose. Lady Bose was a founder, member, and secretary of the trust, this trust, a pioneer in the women education in the Indian subcontinent, also a social political reformer, visionary, one of the early feminists of India. Her contribution to widow alleviation is remarkable. Lady Bose founded about 200 schools for women in Jagadis and Bengal province. A co-founder of Rural College, Girls College, the Tala Girls School. Post-independence, Lady Bose's objective of spreading education, income generating programs among the women of underprivileged section of the society is government policy. Lady Bose was also a governing body member of Bose Institute along with Tagore and J.C. Bose. Her contribution in shaping present-day Bose Institute for research in interdisciplinary sciences is commendable. She nurtured Bose's illustrious students, Meghna Saha, S.N. Bose, P.C. Mahalanabish, S.K. Mitra, D.M. Bose. Most of them are others. To groom to their full potential. Now I'll tell a few words about J.C. Bose Trust, its mission for others who have yet to visit Acharya Bhavan. Acharya Bhavan is a 20 years old heritage building of the city. Bose built this historical residence in 1902 and Bose couple lived there till their last day. Acharya Bhavan today is a treasure to many personalia, memorabilia of the Bose couple, many artifacts of historical importance, rich repository of Bose's original instruments, books, manuscript, rare art collection, etc. First Indian national designed by Sister Nivedita in 1996 is restored and housed in Acharya Bhavan. Murals, paintings by renowned artists Nandalal Bose and other contemporaries. Bharat Mata, antique furnitures, rare sculptures, collection of Bose, and many gifts from the world luminaries. Many of the Bose's path-breaking experiments on responses to plants, to various stimuli, radio waves, cosmic unity, etc., were carried out in the laboratory in this house. Acharya Bhavan also played an important role in the nationalist movement during Bengal Renaissance. Here, Bose played host to many luminaries of the country, Rabindranath Tagore, Swami Vivekananda, Sister Nivedita, Mahatma Gandhi, Acharya Bhavan, and his notable students I mentioned earlier. His interaction with the world luminaries, Albert Einstein, Bernard Shaw, Romerola, Lord Raleigh, Henry Cavendish, to name just a few, add to the glory of Acharya Bhavan. Today, Acharya Bhavan stands as a monument to the multifaceted genius of Acharya Bose. It is the life and works of Sir J.C. Bose vis-a-vis the history of that era that is treasured in Acharya Bhavan, where science, arts, philosophy, and nationalism converge seamlessly. Acharya Bhavan thus has an illustrious past and heritage which needs to be preserved at all costs for posterity. Sir J.C. Bose Trust, a trust founded by Bose himself in 1931, has been entrusted to maintain Acharya Bhavan along with its movable and immovable properties, separate from those of Bose Institute, to preserve Bose's legacy and heritage treasured in Acharya Bhavan. Mission of the present trustees is to develop Acharya Bhavan into a world-class science heritage museum in memory of J.C. Bose, just as Albert Einstein House, Bern and Marie Curie's house in Warsaw were converted into museum. We appeal to you all to support this great mission of the nation. A trust is gratefully acknowledge support and cooperation of INSA and all of you to make the program a great success. I extend cordial invitation to all of you to visit Acharya Bhavan in trouble-free days and look forward to see you all there soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paruli. Thank you very much, Mr. Chakraborty. I welcome all of you to this online webinar on science and philosophy as a tribute to Acharya Jagadish Chandra Bose, Sister Nivedita, and Lady Abala Bose. We have two stellar speakers today, Professor Chandrima Saha and Mr. Johar Sharkar. I will introduce both of them. I will start with Chandrima Saha. Chandrima is a biologist of international renown. She's been attempting to understand death for many years. This might come as a surprise that she's been attempting to understand death. Indeed, she's been trying to do that, but not deaths of individuals, but deaths of cells. And the reason why she's been attempting to understand death is because her work is inspiring in the quest for discovering treatments for various kinds of diseases. That's the reason why she needs to understand cell death, and that's the reason why she's been studying that for all her life, or for a large portion of her life, for which she's gained international eminence. She's become fellows of all of the science academies in India. She's a fellow of the World Academy of Sciences. Currently, she is a professor of eminence at the National Institute of Immunology in Delhi. She was the director until recently of the same institute, of the National Institute of Immunology. Today, she holds a prestigious position. She's the president of the Indian National Science Academy, and we are all very proud that she's the first president of the academy, an academy that is about more than 80 years old. She is, needless to say, Professor Shaha is very well decorated for her profound contributions to science. She's won various medals and awards from various organizations. She's very recently, year before last, won the Shanti Sarup Bhatnagar Award, a medal of the Indian National Science Academy. So we are very proud that she is able to come and deliver this talk. And most importantly, as the president of the Indian National Science Academy, she has kindly collaborated with the Acharya Jagadish Chandra Bose Trust to organize this particular webinar, of which she is the first speaker. Without further ado, may I invite Professor Chandrima Shaha to deliver her talk.
Thank you, Professor Majumdar, Professor Parul Chakraborty, Professor Vikas Chakraborty, Professor Barma, Professor Sri Sharkar. It is indeed an honor to have been invited to deliver a lecture on science and society in this forum of J.C. Bose Trust. And I'm very happy to share my thoughts here. And what I wanted to convey here is that how science and society is interacting these days, and how it is important to have science, technology, and society together. So we look around us and we know that science and technology has really become a part of our lives, and it is so much intertwined that and involved with society that we often fail to recognize how much we are depending on science and how much it is helping us to survive in a world that is increasingly dependent on technology. Now, in this regard, I would like to mention, which all of you know, but I would like to reiterate that how efficiently scientists responded to the pandemic challenge in identifying the virus, studying its biology, sequencing it, designing vaccines, and also having vaccine at a very fast pace. Nevertheless, technology developed after years and years. This is after years and years of basic research. And that really came in handy in this period. And that is how technology has become an integral part of our existence. And without this science, it wouldn't have been possible to help society encounter this pandemic. Now, at this point of time, I would like to share some slides. Yeah. So can you see my first slide?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, we are able to see your slides.
Okay, all right. So, so why is science important to society? Now, we know that knowledge is the main resource in society, and the scientific enterprise itself, comprising of various components, contributes to the generation of knowledge and drives innovation. This runs the functioning of democracies and makes the country self-sufficient and competitive in global economy. Now, the other important thing about science is that it can question and trigger reflection, and thus has a very important role to play in the intellectual realm of a human mind. Now, this is a painting by Raphael, and if you go to the Vatican Museum, this adorns the very predominantly the Raphael room. And here, essentially, what you see is a group of intellectuals And this is Aristotle and this is Plato who's walking down here. And this man here is called Diogenes, who there are various interpretation of this painting, but it is one of my favorites because this Diogenes is an intellectual, and he asks questions. He asks question to Plato, to Aristotle, and so he is in a way representing a body which questions knowledge. So this gentleman could be Archimedes or Euclid. So there are various interpretations, but the main thing is that the knowledge of Plato and Aristotle was being questioned by Diogenes. So the world at this point of time is facing a difficult challenge. And in that backdrop, science is being subjected to vehement demands from society, calling for more openness, transparency, and the public participation in science policy. The direct consequence of the evolution of how science has pervaded public life and how society is becoming an active participant in that role of science, which has changed over a period. And there is an increased expectation on the openness on how science is executed. A new conception of knowledge appears to be emerging based on awareness of the complexity and uncertainty and the plurality of the legitimate perspectives. Now, the scientific realm was one very exclusive, and the public was far away from it. Now, it must submit to public scrutiny and participation in very appropriate ways. And hence, society is beginning to become engaged in the process of the governance of knowledge, and society is asking questions. So the policies, the future policies will be governed by analysis of methods and tools that is decided by the scientists and also looked at upon by the society itself and for knowledge quality assurance. So, so in a way, if you look at a very simplistic diagram, here science seeks to improve society, and it does through technology. So technology demands more from science because a lot of basic science is required for technology to do, for technology to evolve through innovation. So that makes life easier for society, and society demands therefore more from science. So this is a simplistic diagram which establishes a sort of a relationship between science, society, and technology. Now, can we measure impact of science on society? There is something called, something recently developed called Ultrametric Attention Score, which is a correlation that the number of citations, when the number of citations increase, there is an increase in Ultrametric score actually means that how it has reached to the different quarters. Like online, upon online engagement, how many people have actually accessed, how many media has actually shown it. So the number of social media shares by researchers and the general public is actually plotted. But importantly, this doesn't tell that what is the impact of science, because impact means that what benefit it gave to the society. And so that in more simplistic terms, research can, this can be analyzed in this way, that it picked up by 63 news outlets, blogged by 11, tweeted by more than 7,000, 5 on Facebook pages, referenced in 2 Wikipedia pages, re-edited by 6, and mentioned in Google posts, and 140 readers on Mendeley. So this is how it is represented here. And this actually shows how much it has reached, to what kind of people, what kind of audience it has reached. But it really doesn't show the impact that that the particular technology developed through science has generated in the society. So there would be other algorithms are being developed, which probably would help in measuring that. Now, this is a statement by Carl Sagan, who was a very famous astronomer, that we live in a society exquisitely dependent on science and technology, in which hardly anyone knows anything about science and technology. Note what he's saying. that in which hardly anyone knows anything about science and technology, which is actually true because at the point when Carl Sagan said this, at that time there was a very big divide between science and society. But now, with increasingly more exposure with the social media, with the more journals, it is becoming possible that more and more people know about the science and technology. Now, there is a sort of a trust deficit between science and the society, which is unavoidable because although we have increased our knowledge about ourselves, our surroundings, and we survive better, there is a trust deficit because some of the adverse effects of technology. Now, as you know, that the climate change, the pollution adversely affects health. And we also know that pesticides are harmful, and we are taking in quite substantial amount of pesticides. And there are adverse effects of drugs. These all lead to sort of negative thoughts. So the most recent questions I can bring in is the vaccines and their reliability. So there has been so much controversy about how vaccines are, whether to believe that this vaccine is actually working or not. So this has led to some sort of mistrust, and so there are many people who would not be fulfilling their social duty by taking the vaccines. So this lack of trust actually has a long-term consequence in terms of policy making affecting health, economy, and society as a whole. So that is why dissemination of proper information is actually essential. So now the growing area, interfaces between science and society is a growing area of exploration. And this is a direct consequence of the evolution of how science has pervaded public life and how society is becoming an active participant in that changing role of science. A new conception appears to be emerging, which is based on the awareness of complexity and uncertainty. Now, interdisciplinary programs have evolved that integrates natural sciences, technology, history, philosophy, sociology, economics, political science, geography, and anthropology. So the students of these areas have an access to various questions on science and society. So if we make a sort of a Venn diagram, where we see that these are three components: science, technology, and society. So what is at the intersection of the three? Now, in the shared space between science and society, where we have scientists and society with its culture, humanity, and politics, there the areas of exploration could be dynamics of science as a social institution, philosophical basis for scientific knowledge, and history of the disciplines. And the space between technology and society, the explorations could be increasing knowledge and evolution of technology, the impact of technology on society, and the change in the ideas that are occurring, and lastly, the impact of this on science. So this is also a very important area. So the intersection actually becomes an area which is an interdisciplinary area, which is science, technology, and society, or STS studies, which is usually defined as the confluence of these three fields with distinct intellectual lineages and orientations. So this intersection is very important and is a very emerging area of interest in the would be in the coming future, would be a very I suppose very expanding area of work. Now, in the early days of science, research choice was largely driven by individual curiosity. Because if you look at this montage, what you see, the individuals that we know, starting from Madame Curie to Einstein to Barbara McClintock to Corey to Johar. So they were doing research for their own experiment, for their own excitement, to explore the mysteries. But society had very little expectations then, and it was almost an individual enterprise at that point of time. But later, it became science became a group work in many ways. So now it has become a common parlance in society because more and more money. Common parlance in society that what is happening with so much investment in science. That is because more and more money is being pumped in science. Now, essentially, society is questioning science. So to many, there is a division between the blue sky research and applied research. But in reality, for technology to evolve, basic science is very essential. And this basic science evolves over a period of time. And the questions that are asked when basic research is started may not actually indicate what can happen in future. So we have seen that expanding fundamental knowledge has made enormous contributions to solving global challenges and sustaining healthy and prosperous societies. Now, as I said, that it will be it is difficult to see what this basic research is going to lead into future. There are many examples of that. But investment in basic research actually creates essential human and intellectual capital, and that enriches society in unpredictable ways, including new healthcare technologies and also technologies that spawn new industries, uplifting the global standard of living. There is discovery, experiments, and knowledge. There is participation of scientists and students and researchers. And then there is application of knowledge, which now we have startups, we have entrepreneurs who are actually actively soliciting information from scientists, basic scientists, and taking them to an application state. Now, when one of the examples is when Benjamin Franklin discovered electricity, no one knew how electricity would transform society. So there are many examples like this. Since we are talking about Sir J.C. Bose, his discoveries also that was a very fundamental, he did very fundamental research and had enormous implications in technology development and even eventually created benefit to society. So Bose's millimeter waves found applications in a variety of fields since their discovery almost 100 years ago, and they're used in everything from radio telescopes and more recently collision warning systems and cruise control in modern day cars. And we know that 5G is just around the corner, and what he generated, those 5 millimeter electromagnetic waves, it's at 60 gigahertz, before instruments even evolved to measure those frequencies that low. So the millimeter wave that he worked on is the backbone of developing 5G. So one can see the implication of his work, which he did many, many years ago. We are now reaping the benefits of it. So basic science is like that. And it is very important that basic science is continued, funding to basic science is continued, and society supports basic science. So one of the things is the respect for observation. So respect for observation is, we saw that in older times when tradition or fixation with existing knowledge actually did not respect the observations done by scientists at that in the olden days, and the process of science insists on it, and the frequent clashes with authority that happened with the church, particularly with the church, were due to this insistence. Now, Galileo, when he actually saw the moons of the Jupiter, he insisted that the senior members of the society come and have a look at that. But nobody actually did look through his telescope, and concluded that he was lying. So that respect for observation has to be there. So there is this dilemma about observation and traditional beliefs that we have. So one of the things that now becomes apparent, that for this to happen, for the society to recognize science, we have to communicate science properly to the society. We often report to society what our findings are, but we seldom tell society what is the process of science. Like there is observation, there is question, there is hypothesis, evolved from the questions, and then where the hypothesis has to be proved by the experiments, it can be yes, it can be no, and then there is conclusion and ultimately the benefits. But so this is very important that we explain the process. This has happened with the vaccines, that as soon as the infection occurred, people were asking questions that where is the vaccine? But nobody really appreciated the fact that it takes many years to develop vaccines. What has been done in an emergency situation. But this process, we do not really explain to the society. So that is one important aspect. And in this model, if you see, in this deficit model, society is the receiver of information. But if you do to multiple segments of society, like you do to the government, to trade and industry, you transmit your thoughts, your ideas, your data to in a dialogue model from the government to trade and industry. There is a feedback to government, then to society as a whole. Society opines on what is important for them, what they want. And it's called sort of contributors of social intelligence. So there are models that can be used to communicate better with society. So, and society also becomes responsible in a way for science. Now, there is a societal support required for science, because society has diverse members. Like scientists are part of society, and as I said, they need support from society. Now, who can give support? There are writers, there are artists, there are entrepreneurs, mentors, and friends. So this societal support is necessary, and it is now science, as I said, is more or less a collaborative activity. And at one point of time, it was done mostly on intellectual curiosity by single individuals. So it's become necessary to give support. Now, in this context, I again wanted to mention Sir J.C. Bose, that Rabindranath Tagore was a great supporter of Bose's researches and discovery. And if you look at it, there are many letters exchanged between these two gentlemen who were intellectually at least 50, 60 years ahead of their times. Tagore found in Bose's works an essence of Indian scientific spirit and a reflection of Indian national culture, its national pride and heritage. So Tagore has had many intellectual discussions with Bose, and Bose actually elaborated that how Tagore has influenced his ideas and his work, and unity in diversity and different concepts like that. He admitted that he acquired a wider view of life after his discussions with Tagore. So this is a sort of testament of how support from intellectuals in society can inspire scientists. So this is a very interesting chapter, how Bose and Tagore interacted, and one can spend substantial amount of time reading through the letters and their conversations. Now, Dr. Parul Chakraborty mentioned about Sister Nivedita. She was a great supporter of Bose, and at the time of the colonial in the colonial era, what happened, what usually sometimes happened, is because of the high-handedness of the British government, scientists often got suppressed. So Sister Nivedita sort of realized J.C. Bose's potential, and she knew that he was best suited to raise the national prestige. So she not only supported him intellectually, in sort of looking through his manuscripts, etc. But she also raised research funds for Bose to work on. So this kind of support is required. And also Dr. Chakraborty mentioned about J.C. Bose's wife, Dr. J.C. Bose's wife, Srimati Abala Bose. Abala Bose was a great social reformer, and she created many opportunities for women's education. So he was married to a very enlightened woman in his life who was a great support to him. So such kind of support is very essential for a scientist to thrive. Now, as I said, that the society consists of a variety of people, and if you see this painting, it is by Gaganendranath Tagore, who made satires and who made cartoons out of current situations. So this is called nature screen. This is an inanimate screen that he was looking at Bose and all his work on the what we call Lajjavati Lata in Bengal, and this painting actually depicts that. So he had he made many powerful cartoons in the socio-political scenario of Bengal in the early 20th century. And so sort of that also, when society sees a painting, they also recognize that what kind of work a scientist is doing, whether it's in a satire or it's in plain, a depiction of the work. So now coming to the current day big data things, that the analysis of big data is actually is promising to benefit science and society. The analysis is opening up and will open up new lines of inquiry in several areas, because you have large amount of data from a variety of sources, and it will make impact in several. It has already made impact in several areas like computer science, statistics, ethics, health sciences, organizational behavior, information science, sociology, and behavioral economics. Now, with an appropriate analysis of big data, very, very crucial questions can be asked, and that in a way could give leads to translational data science, because the potential of big data can be realized then. And the translational data science actually applies data science principles, techniques, and technologies to challenging scientific problems that hold the promise of having an important impact on human societal welfare. So another important area is that crowdsourcing. I'm not sure how beneficial crowdsourcing actually has been, but crowdsourcing is a method that allows members of the public to contribute ideas and time to projects, though by people who are not formally trained as scientists. So a range of research projects has already been successfully employed by this method of work. How much impact it is going to have is there to see. And so crowdsourcing allows the researchers to collect and analyze data on a much, much larger scale. So in terms of speed, through high throughput and cost, this helps. This crowdsourcing actually helps. So what is called citizen science can actually build public trust in research. So society actually participates directly through this crowdsourcing. And by involving the non-researchers in the scientific process, researchers can understand perspectives of the public, and the public scientific understanding actually improves. So this is a way, although the impact of this is still not known, but this is a way to sort of involve society more. So Michael Bishop, who is a Nobel laureate, said that science now finds itself in paradoxical strife with society, admired but mistrusted, boasting remarkable advances but criticized, which is very, very true. And the social movements like environmentalism, nuclear disarmament, anti-vaccine movement actually lead the clash of society with the scientists. So one needs to sort of impart I mean, there are you know, technology. There are not so good effects of technology. So there is a mistrust. But with the activism building in the societal movements, then there is more sort of discontent among the society that whether science is actually really benefiting them or creating more difficulties. But the benefits of science are so enormous that weighing it against the difficulties may be difficult. Now, lastly, I would like to say something about scientific social responsibility. This is what has now come as a policy, that it is an ethical obligation of knowledge workers in all fields of science and technology to voluntarily contribute their knowledge and resources to the widest possible spectrum of the society in the spirit of service and reciprocity. It works on an ethical obligation of giving back to the less endowed stakeholders of science, technology, innovation, and society at large. So we've had, scientists who have been very successful can actually talk to people and sort of engage with them to lay people, to engage with them and make them understand science, and in a way that is what is called scientific social responsibility. And there is kind of a two-way street of impact between science and society in this. As science has an impact on society, society must also impact science in a way. So we have to connect with the larger society, to students, to teachers, to farmers, MSMEs, startups. So this is something that I wanted to say, that the responsibility of scientists towards society is huge, and at the same time the society also has to support science and understand that in science, while many good things are generated, there could be difficulties in some areas. That is unavoidable. So this is all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Chandrima, thank you very much.
Could you hear me? Because I got disconnected.
Yeah, no. I heard all the while.
Okay.
No, there was no. I don't know if others have been able to hear you. I heard you the entire length.
I don't know.
You can stop sharing, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, I think you need to stop sharing. Then we can all see one another. I don't see any questions for you in the chat box. So let me appeal to the Chandrima, you will be here till the end of the session, right?
Yes.
Okay, so let me appeal to the audience that if you have any questions or comments on Professor Shaha's talk, please feel free to note down your comments on the chat. And at the end of the session, we'll get to you and I will relay or narrate your questions to Professor Shaha. Our next speaker is Mr. Johar Sharkar. Mr. Johar Sharkar, I guess, is known to most of you, if not all of you. He certainly has been a friend of the Jagadish Bose Trust and of Acharya Bhavan. We have interacted with him for many, many years, and he's been extremely helpful and cooperative with us. Mr. Sharkar, joined the Indian Administrative Service in 1975. He served in various capacities in various ministries. Eventually, he became a secretary to the government of India, provided leadership to the Ministry of Culture for a long time, and he last served as the chief executive officer of Prasar Bharati. He's also provided leadership to various stellar institutions such as the Indian Museum, the Victoria Memorial Museum, the National Museum, the National Library, National School of Drama, India International Film Festival. What more can I say? And many others that I may not even be aware of. Mr. Sharkar is a critical thinker. a prolific writer, and a versatile speaker. I'm pretty sure that we'll get a taste of that today. He's written several books and book chapters. His book, and I tell you the title of the book, The Construction of Hindu Identity in Medieval Western Bengal, The Role of Popular Cults, is a testimony to his deep understanding of Indian culture, history, and anthropology. And I say this with confidence since I've actually read the book which Mr. Sarkar had presented to me some years ago. Mr. Sarkar has been, like I said, has been associated with this trust and has helped and encouraged the trust to move forward. We are extremely grateful that he can be with us today, and we look forward to his lecture. Mr. Sharkar.
Thank you very much. The introduction was a little embarrassing, but since all of you must be wondering what on earth I'm doing here, I can assure you that when I walked out of science in 1966, I made an oath never to revisit the slicing up of frogs or cockroaches, and that was the end of it. I decided to go in for something more useful, in my opinion. But there, all my life, science never left me. I was associated, I had to become Secretary of Science and Technology, Education. I keep noticing. And I was also chairman of JBNSTS, have been in charge of the science cities and science museums all over India in the capacity as Secretary Culture. So in other words, the ghost of science is on my back. There's no way I can get out of it. This invitation was very interesting and the subject or the coverage more interesting. You see, all the three persons, at least two of the three, have fascinated me and many others for a long, long time. Sister Nivedita and Acharya J.C. Bose. Lady Abala Bose is also quite well known, and since I worked, one of my first postings was at SDO Barrackpur. I used to go to the industrial cooperative she had set up called Uday Villa. It was still alive. I don't know how it is working now in Belghodia. Now, I would start by drawing this triangular relationship with certain specifics. Let us try to pin down the ages of the three personalities. Bose was born in 1858. Abula Das was born in 1865, 7 years younger than her. And Nivedita was born in 1867, which makes her 2 years younger than Abula Bose and 9 years younger than J.C. Bose. Yet, as you are all aware, she had this maternal affection for J.C. Bose that was clear all through. And this has been the stuff of lore. How she used to treat him like as if she was a younger brother or child. Hoka. She used to call him by a very Scottish name or an Irish Celtic name, Band. Okay. Now, having established the starting point, if we go to the ending points, you will see that while Bose lived for 78 years and died in 1937, Abula Bose went on for 86, a good, sprightly 86, working all her life. And Nivedita, on the other hand, the youngest among them, died the earliest. She died at just 44 in 1911. The simple point that we can deduce is how many years did they spend together? Now, Nivedita arrived in Kolkata on the 28th of January, 1898. And from 1898 till her death in 1911, it would just be 13 years. And in between, she had some trips. So 13 odd years, they were known to each other, they were together. And when did they meet? Okay. Here we refer to a letter of April 1903 that Sister Nivedita had written to Rabindranath Tagore, where she says that she met J.C. Bose and Abala Bose in 1898 winter. So, I mean, it's like within a few months of her coming, she came to know them. She came to know them. Now, the three stars we have with us represent two important approaches to the socio-religious framework of Bengal and India in the last decades of the 19th century. The period of the Enlightenment, extreme argument. Now, both J.C. Bose and Lady Abala, she was not lady, so I'll not refer to her as lady because for the period that Sister Nivedita lived, she was still Mrs. Abala Bose, and she would become a knight's wife later. So during this period, I mean, between these three dramatic personnel, we have two separate ways of looking at life. One was Brahmoism that abhorred idolatry, that condemned the excesses and certain malpractices of Hinduism, that believed in a church-like, dignified, cathedral-type worship. Whereas on the other hand, Nivedita, being the disciple of Vivekananda, believed in Hinduism as it existed, with all the noise and sound and fury. An interesting episode that comes to my mind is that in the next year, I think it was in January or February, Sister Nivedita made one of her earliest public speeches on Kali. Kali, emphasizing her dreadful aspects, as she put it, in public. It was in the Calcutta Town Hall. And within a few months, she was writing about Jagadish Bose's work. I mean, she found no contradiction in her belief in deep Hinduism of the rather vibrant variety and the very peaceful practices of the Brahmo religion. Incidentally, to study these three characters, we have no option but to come to two more persons, because without these two, we cannot understand the players on our table, on our stage. These two persons are Rabindranath Tagore, who was a common friend of Jagadish Bose and Abala Bose, and very well known to Sister Nivedita, and Vivekananda, who was the reason why Sister Nivedita was there in the first place. To sum up their dates of years of birth, Tagore was born in 1861, which is 3 years after J.C. Bose, which explains. I used to wonder why why J.C. Bose was so casual with Rabindranath Tagore. Why were there portraits or photographs where Bose was sitting and Tagore was standing? After all, I thought that he is the Nobel laureate. Whatever. I mean, the fact that Bose deserved to be a Nobel laureate much before Tagore is another point. But I used to keep wondering, and then I found, no, he's 3 years older than Rabindranath Tagore. So he was 3 years older, and Vivekananda was 1863, which was 2 years after Tagore. So when we talk of Tagore and Vivekananda, I remember my days in the Ministry of Culture when their 150-year celebrations came up, and it was one continuum, practically, one continuum of celebrations and installations and public works, like the Ramakrishna Mission's hospital annex. Okay, now this is important to understand the two very powerful background players and the relation between them. It's very surprising, even to students of history, to know that though they had a short overlap between Swami Vivekananda and Rabindranath Tagore, they never met. They never met, and they had no desire to meet each other. When we talk of great persons, Mahapurush, we all tend to take frames hung up on the wall next to each other in peaceful coexistence. But factually, they may have lots of differences, a lot of bitterness as well. Vivekananda had invited Nivedita, and Nivedita had joined his order, but joined his philosophical order, not the Ramakrishna Mission, and yet Nivedita remained all along a free soul. She remained a free soul. In other words, she lived on her own terms, and even if Swamiji did not like someone or expressed certain doubts about people, Nivedita was too strongly Irish, Scottish to be cowed down, and she went and visited the person and reported back to Swamiji because she used to call him master. Now, here in one of these interactions between Tagore and Vivekananda, about Tagore and Vivekananda, the statement that Rebashom brings out from a letter that Nivedita wrote, and she quote unquotes what Swamiji had said about Tagore. This is very interesting. Remember, as long as you go on mixing with Tagore, Margot was his way of calling Margaret. He used to call her Margot. I must warn you that that family has poured a flood of erotic venom over Bengal. This was one of his many statements, Vivekananda. Vivekananda was an impetuous person and could go on to give his statement in as hard a manner as he felt. He has many other opinion about Tagore. The single point was that Vivekananda needed fighters. He needed men with strength and conviction, and he felt Rabindranath and others were weakening the Bengali race, were weakening Indians. They were softening them. They couldn't be in a position going for struggle. As a self-righteous man, he was pretty much bothered about that soft erotic love poetry and others. Nevertheless, Sister Nivedita went with J.C. Bose, a very strong friend, senior friend, as we found out, of Rabindranath Tagore, to visit Rabindranath Tagore in Bodh Gaya. That was the way they went in 1904 to visit Bodh Gaya. And she wrote back to Swamiji that I'm having a very good time. That I find Tagore to be fascinating. Yet the fact that she kept on arguing with Tagore does not come out in her letters, but Tagore expresses his opinion, candid opinion, to others, saying that while he admired this foreign lady's complete identification with India, Indians, Hinduism, he never, of course, publicly raised any doubt as to why she chose the old brand of Hinduism instead of taking the more westernized versions of Brahmoism. He never came to that point. But he commended her on her total identification, her patriotism for India, as she put it, her sincerity, her tremendous energy. Rabindranath commended all that. But Rabindranath felt that she was acerbic. She was impulsive. She was too strong, too reckless. And somehow he felt that she did not like Tagore's philosophy or Tagore per se. He put it specifically, I don't think she likes me, whatever. And he used to balk at her aggressive nature. Incidentally, the same Tagore persuaded her to join his household and teach English to the daughters, but Nivedita said no, she got out of this relation. How these relationships act is very interesting. The visit to Bodh Gaya that I mentioned to you, on the return train, when Nivedita went to see off Jagadish Bose and Abala Bose, they were not allowed entry into the first class compartment by certain white people. Just rudely said no. It was then that Nivedita got up, literally shouted at them, told them law, pulled the bosses in, made them sit and go. And she could do it because she was white herself. But when her train came, which was a little later, she chose not to get into the whites compartment and went and sat some other compartment. Okay. Now, uh, coming to Abala Bose and their relation, we have to start with the fact that Nivedita came into the Bose household through Abala. Now, Nivedita had a background that we need to understand a bit. She had been a teacher, and pretty early in her life, very early in her life, she had been a teacher. She had adopted one of the most advanced techniques of teaching the young, which was at that time known as Prestology Froebel. Prestology was a Swiss, and Froebel was a German who had invented a new technique of school and primary preschool education, where they insisted that children should learn through playing, not through formal instruction of any type. So this was very novel an idea in the late 19th century. And Margaret Nobel, that is Sister Nivedita's original, Margaret Nobel was very impressed, and she took this up and used these techniques in a school where she was working. By 24, at the age of 24, she had set up her own school in London at Kingsley Gate. She was involved in the school education and children's education and so many other aspects of welfareism, which is the reason why she got very friendly with Abula Bose right from the beginning. And in the early few meetings, she was basically Abula Bose's friend who had come to the Bose household. Now, that I must tell you a couple of things about, since we mentioned about Tagore getting a little worried about Nivedita's hard attitude. Nivedita also studied art during this period from one Miss Cook. I'm talking about days in Britain. She studied, and this Miss Cook was the one who took her to the first Swami Vivekananda to meet Swami Vivekananda for the first time in 1895. It is this Miss Cook's education on art that would come in very handily for the illustrations in the books of J.C. Bose. I'll come to that a little later. So, a little later, in January 1898, as I told you, she landed in Kolkata. And by March 1898, she was declared a Brahmacharini by Swami Vivekananda. Now, the Ramakrishna Mission had also been formed that year, just a few months before and after. And the mission, the sadhus who joined the mission were not very sure as to what exactly was this form of a mission. Mott had been there in India, but this mission with a hyper-energetic person like Narendra Vivekananda, they were not very sure. And while they were floundering, came the plague in Kolkata. And in the plague, within the second or third day, Nivedita left her school at Bagh Bazaar, took some people with her, took a broom, took buckets, and started cleaning up the garbage. Because as a European, she knew that plague thrived on garbage. The fact that tackling garbage on the streets was most unclean and that one would lose one's caste and other things, she knew. She had known enough of India, but she couldn't care. And she went on cleaning the locality. It is then that she summoned the young monks of Ramakrishna Mission to come and help her. Some of them objected. Said that we have forsaken of the world to be in terms with God. She said, nonsense. You are here to serve humanity. To serve humanity, the motto that would drive the Ramakrishna Mission and make it what it is today was partly a stimulation received from this impetuous lady. I mean, there's just one tale I have to tell you. Having said that, we know for certain that that Abala Bose and J.C. Bose took Nivedita practically into the family. They were very familiar. That there was a time when J.C. Bose would walk to the Bagbaja school every day, that there would be discussions. Nivedita would go very frequently. They would go out for their tours and visits, not only in India, but abroad jointly. Now, here was a single lady who had to have some familial ties, and Bose's family was the only family, was perhaps the main family. So, uh, so having said that, the Bose family took her in, and almost all the visits and tours that they made, travels that they made within India, Mrs. Bose was a prolific traveler. Jagadish Bose also went, but Mrs. Bose could hardly be resting in one place beyond a point of time. And Nivedita had extra batteries of energy. So they went, and in fact, it was during one of the visits that she died. But having said that, we know for certain that Jagadish Bose was financially helped by Sister Nivedita. Uh, those pieces of evidence are rock solid. We know the letters through which Sister Nivedita appealed for assistance. Who were the candidates to whom she appealed? They were actually the same persons to whom she was also appealing for financial assistance in the West for Swami Vivekananda also, more or less, and how they helped, and how we all know the story of how Jagadish Bose was ill-treated by his European colleagues when he joined Presidency College, how he had to set up a laboratory there with the minimal of assistance and funding, how he stopped taking his salary, and that is the time when financial assistance came in. But one issue that we all tend to take for granted needs to be proved. Science, unfortunately, is a harsh subject that only acts on proof. So this question has been raised by several persons, or this series of questions. Number one, how can we claim that Sister Nivedita was actually helping Jagadish Bose when Jagadish Bose never said a word about it? Yes, Jagadish Bose never said a word about it, any of his books. None of his books were dedicated to her. Nowhere did he write in the foreword or in the acknowledgement that Sister Nivedita was with me, or he never even made any statement about the existence, public statement about the existence of Sister Nivedita. And now, if you look at Sister Nivedita's side, you'll find she was prolifically writing to all and sundry. Oh, I'm so busy with Jagadish Bose. I'm helping him there. So let us go through some evidence to come to try to draw some conclusions. As I told you, one of the interesting letters, incidentally, these letters that I'm talking about are mainly published in Shankari Prasad Basu's book, and there are other sources as well. So, in one of our early letters to Rabindranath Tagore, this was on the 20th of July, 1901, Sister Nivedita wrote that, no, sorry, my mistake. In this letter of 20th July, 1901, Bose informed Tagore of a very interesting development. She says that I have found an English assistant. She came as a novice, so we know it's English. That it was a she, came in as a novice, but now she has a glowing face with interest. This is all that he mentioned. No names, nothing. Now, Bose, the families, or rather Nivedita, came to know the Boses from late 1898, and 1899 was the time when they were out for a considerable period. And 99, she had started helping, whatever her version of helping Bose. And in 2 years after that, Bose says that I have found a new English assistant. This is one indicative letter. In an earlier letter, he had, of course, mentioned Tagore that I have been inspired by this lady. This is practically the only evidence we find until her death. We find many other letters between Tagore and Bose, but we don't find any mention. I'll come to that later. In April 1904, we find a letter from Jagadish Bose to Mrs. Bull. Mrs. Bull was a common friend, where he says that I'm finding extreme difficulty in getting my illustrations done, as I can't get anyone to do this skilled craft. I have to go down and do it slowly myself. There is no follow-up letter on this where he mentions that he has found that Nivedita possesses considerable artistic skill to complete this illustration. So we have this very half-hearted, half-sketching things. Neither did J.C. Bose mention, nor do his biographers mention. Now, I haven't seen this book by Bushu Biggan Mundir, which had actually come out in Bangla in 1863 and then in English in 2008. Rai, Bhattacharya, Mitra and others. I have not seen it. I wish I could come over. But I believe this is the most authentic, authoritative biography of Acharya Jagadish Bose. This also does not mention the link, or doesn't mention it so emphatically, the link with Sister Nivedita. If so, I think we need to go in for an appendix to it. The other book, famous book on Acharya Jagadish Bose, A Scientist and a Dreamer, is the one edited by Bhattacharya, an engineer, in 1996. This also does not make any mention. So neither does Bose make any mention, nor do his biographers make any mention. So how on earth do we come to the conclusion that Nivedita was being actively helping him? We need more proof. So when we come to proof, we come to two more biographers, S. Dasgupta, Jagadish Chandra Bose, and the Indian Response to Western Science. He does mention in 2 pages, 76 and 162, that Sister Nivedita was of some assistance. Now listen, of some assistance, and the type of assistance that we believe he offered in historical terms to being one of the greatest supporters, one of the pillars of Jagadish Bose's strength, are not the same thing. So in Dasgupta's book, we don't get that feeling. Sister Devamata wrote a book called My Days in an Indian Monastery, which was published first in 1927 and then in 1970, reprinted by the Ramakrishna Mission, Chennai in 1975. There she mentioned, again without empirical evidence, she mentioned quite briefly that Nivedita assisted Bose, but did not get into any details. So here is the plodding student of history who's trying to find solid evidence to base the suppositions and the folklore about Nivedita and Bose being almost partners. Now, let us look at Nivedita's side. From Nivedita, she has been mentioning continuously, practically after her coming, but she is also not very clear into what capacity she helping him. She's not a scientist. She did not go to college. She had gone through a lot of schools, but she had never even studied college. She didn't have a graduation, and I think, and she had an uncanny mind for both uh, scientific facts. Yes, she knew physics, she knew biology enough to more than maybe many of us. She knew art, but how does one help a scientist, however elementary be his stage of laboratory research? So, but she kept on writing that I am on the job. Okay, I'll give the evidence of 29 letters that she wrote to Miss Josephine MacLeod and to Mrs. Bull. In these 29 letters, she's full of that, she's helping Bose, but in the initial stages, she's not very sure. She says she's with Bose, but she doesn't make any claims of making a joint effort. As we proceed further towards 1907 and 1900, she says it is our work. Nivedita wrote the first letter in 1900, October 3rd. She said, I'm helping Bose to record his chain of thoughts so that they are not broken. Then, a year later, she is writing that we are almost coming close to verifying the Vedantic doctrine of the unity of the universe. Obviously, she was referring to life in plants, which was the major electrical impulse in plant, the major area of work that Bose had picked up. And she was profuse in her letters about whatever she understood about it. On 17th December 1903, she expressed that Bose is now going to come up with a new book. In other words, she was updated about what Bose was doing. She said we are completing a paper. Now this is where historians get into problems. Who's this we? Because there's no other reciprocity from the other part of we, that is Bose never mentioned. Jagadish was never mentioned. In describing Bose in 1904, that is, they have already known each other for about 6 years. Nivedita was very strong, very taken up by people who had a very radiant personality. Tagore attracted her. Okakura attracted her. I mean, attracted means she liked such people. She was a brahmacharini. She had given up the world. And here she says that being near Bose was an appalling white heat of thought. The man was always bubbling with thought. Bose's placid expression would not give you this impression. And she had given her 4 sheets of notes in a hurry and instructed her to write papers based on them by tomorrow. This was the letter from 10th February 1904. So we can see, I mean, a person can't be deluding herself so much and can't be lying so much. But the fact that there is no reciprocity is a reciprocal mention is very interesting. It is only in March 1904 that she comes to the first description of what her work is. If you remember, 4 years before this, Bose had written that he had found an English assistant. And in 17th March 1904, she describes her role as a scientific secretarial work. A scientific secretarial work. So now we are more or less sure on which line this collaboration is going. And she seems to be actively involved in the rest of his work. Just a word about the term assistant and secretarial. Please do not take it in the colonial third world sense of the term. People who have stayed in the first world, studied in the first world, are aware that these posts are not menial, as we tend to tell them. An assistant or a junior partner in any activity is worth the same respect, regard that we give to everyone. So the fact that we use secretarial and assistant, this is not writer's building. This is something different, and the West doesn't treat this job lowly. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that whatever be the secretarial work that she gave, it was a work with high dignity and a sense of equality. Remember, they were eating together, the families were going out together. So she had just specified her role. Sometimes we find she exceeds her brief when she writes to Josephine MacLeod that Bose's paper, she's helping get Bose's paper on philosophical transactions accepted by the paper, the Journal of Philosophical Transactions. Actually, these didn't come through. So some of the letters are not do not find fruition. But then, as I said, in 1904 and that period, she was quite actively involved in Bose's work on biology and electrical impulses, because she felt that the reality that Vedanta, Upanishadic Vedantic thought had mentioned was being really confirmed for the first time in the world of science, when non-human, non-animal creatures were behaving in an animate way. I mean, that itself. But then, you can make out from this active narration, partly gossipy, that Bose would also require to be on his own. On 2nd May 1906, she writes to Mrs. Bull, Bose has exiled me so that he can do some very serious work. I find it a little amusing, but then that is it. Then why did Bose not mention? Nivedita never mentioned the fact that she was never finding any mention in any of his work. She had, on the other hand, justified its thing by saying that, look, Bose is anyway under criticism for non-citation of references, non-citations of previous authors. He doesn't want to complicate the mess by tagging in another person who's not of scientific. I mean, she didn't put it so specifically, but it's clear from her drift. Hello. So this one was that's the other one is that she kept on repeating the fact that Bose is just a single-handed worker. Now this was true. It still doesn't make
Mr. Sharkar, can I hold you for a second? Sangjukta, can you mute yourself?
Okay, now this particular, you see, when you discuss personalities after 100 years, after a length of time, we need to strip ourselves of any impulses towards hagiography. Hagiography is for non-academic work. In any academic discipline, be it on science or social sciences, you see, the fidelity with facts is much more important. And we need to disabuse our mind. So when I am mentioning these things about Bose, I am not putting him down. All I'm doing is to remove some dust of his statue. So there, this one keeps haunting us, that Bose's remarks, on the other hand, while Nivedita is writing so much, Bose's remarks are practically nil on this score. Yes, he does admit at occasional intervals. In a letter on 21st June 1905, Bose informed, this is Jagadish Bose writing to the common friend Mrs. Bull, we have done 3/4 of the work. This is the first time I'm coming across the term we. Nivedita was so involved, she kept on using this term, but this is the first time we came across. In another place, they write same year that Nivedita is packing up the manuscript, not packing in the physical sense, packing up, complete rounding up. Now compare this with the more charitable remarks that Radha Kumar Mukherjee would make. He had given, his script had been taken over by Nivedita with infinite energy, and she had completely changed a lot of it. And the man was so grateful that he went on saying that this form of script is hardly mine. This is Sister Nivedita's work. If we go by her letters, a lot of Bose's work or the expressions and articulations had to undergo a lot of change. Once we give it to, you see, a draft is something, I believe, and many of you will agree, a draft is something that the next person can always improve upon. It doesn't matter who wrote the draft and who's taking it. Something. So there were these changes, but Nivedita's acknowledgement doesn't come out. Okay, it is only when Nivedita died that J.C. Bose came out bluntly and in writing. On 2nd November 1911, J.C. Bose writes, and this has been quoted by Shankar Prasad Basu's in book. He writes to Nivedita's sister, Mrs. Wilson, unquote. And then the book which she was helping me write is staring in my face. I have not at the present the strength to do anything with it. So now you're admitting that this lady was helping you all through, whatever be the form of help, scientific, non-scientific, illustration. When you talk of illustrations, there were literally thousands of illustrations that actually went in. Now, even when you look at Rabindranath, who had a reasonably close knowledge about how Nivedita and Bose function, Rabindranath or his biographers, none of them mention. So at one point of time, if I were ruthlessly empirical, I would say there is no substantive proof. But that is not possible, that it is all folklore. No, it's not possible. We need to find out the grains of truth that militate against the larger degree of the sound of silence, the silence on the other side. If you look at Prabhat Kumar Mukherjee's authoritative biography on Tagore, does mention so many times about Bose and his scientific work, mentions Nivedita in the passing, but never about Nivedita helping J.C. Bose. Not a single mention. So you don't get a confirmation. No, we do. He has one line. Everyone was aware that aware of the life and works of Jagadish Chandra, knew that he was grateful to Nivedita. So at contemporary level, they knew that he was grateful, but it did not come out in writing. That's the problem point. And the problem with studying this evidence in later terms is that we need written evidence or circumstantial evidence. This comes in as a circumstantial evidence. In Prashanta Kumar Pal's book, Robi Jivoni, the same issue. Nivedita's work is consigned to one single sentence. that Nivedita started to help Bose in writing his scientific articles. That's all. So we do get the evidence of involvement, but we do not get that sense that we have inherited that, as if Bose's works could never have come out had it not been for Sister Nivedita. No, I don't think that is fully correct. Mrs. Bull, on the other hand, in her correspondence, uses a third term. She calls Nivedita as the secretary of Bose. So again, we come to the same thing. And as we have explained, the word secretary, assistant, scientific secretary, they actually mean nothing. They were publishing works separately as well. In the same period when uh, Nivedita came up with the Cradle Tales of Hindustan, a very important book, a very interesting book, Cradle Tales of Hindustan, which gives you an insight into how much she knew about India. Bose was publishing Comparative Electrophysiology. They were doing their parallel publications as well. The myth, if I may put it, or the bit of exaggeration was brought in by Lizel Raymond. Lizel Raymond was her first major foreign biographer uh, of Sister Nivedita, and she starts commenting on the how much Nivedita was into Bose's life, scientific life. She gives a lot of evidence in a lot of pages. Now, this is been carried on in the very recent past by Pravarajika Mukti Prana. Now, I know the lady. Pravarajika Mukti Prana has been writing, and Atta Prana, they have been writing books in connection with Nivedita's birth and anniversary celebrations. And in one of them, the whole lot of evidence is packed into one. The gaps are filled in, and it's made to be a concrete sort of a pillar of evidence that without Nivedita, Bose would not be able to write. I mean, this is the sum and substance. Here, I think we are exceeding the amount of evidence available to us, and I won't go through all of it. All of it. We must remember that after Swamiji's death, there were certain circumstances. Nivedita was actively involved in helping the terrorists. She was one of the open supporters of terrorism in Bengal, whereas Indians were more circumspect. They were supposed to be secret societies, and Indians would not come out openly. The Ramakrishna Mission claims, or I claim, the Ramakrishna Mission had its issues as it was completely non-political and was in its cradle practically, in infantile stages. It didn't want to get into trouble with the police. So the Ramakrishna Mission kept more than an arm's length from Sister Nivedita. So one way Swamiji was dead, the Ramakrishna Mission told her to keep her distance. And here she was then involved in terrorist activities. She had this lot of energy which she diverted in different directions. She put off in different directions. This is the time when she took on the support of art and artwork. And I must interrupt here and tell you that when we talk of Ajanta art and its impact, we should not be too theoretical. Ajanta was discovered in 1819, but Ajanta's discovery notwithstanding, there were no external recordings. That means you and I sitting in Kolkata would not know anything about what exactly Ajanta consisted because we had no visuals. There was no visual evidence. Surprisingly, the first lot of visual evidence was made in the 1840s by Ferguson. Now, Ferguson's line drawings were all on the architecture. You know, Ajanta has the beauty of chaitas and other forms of Buddhist architecture. Ferguson found that so fascinating that he did not concentrate on the frescoes, statuaries, and art. the real art form. We don't get anything. Then 2 attempts were made in the late part of the 19th century, and surprisingly, whoever made copies and sent them abroad for exhibition in England, almost all of them got burned mysteriously. So there was absolutely, when we were about to celebrate the 100th year of the discovery of Ajanta, nobody on earth knew, except a small group of students in JJ school in Mumbai, what exactly was Ajanta style. This is the time in the first decade of the 20th century that Lady Herringham came and asked Sister Nivedita for help. And Sister Nivedita picked up Nandalal Bose and Ashit Haldar, and she could be quite bossy, told them that they must go and camp there. Now, Nandalal's problem was that he would not get Bengali food, but we'll not get into all that. So they went at command, and they are the ones who first started drawing. And this is the conversion of the artists of Bengal to the wonders of indigenous art. It is immediately after that the Bengal school would come up of maturity. It would discard all forms of Western art and would devise its own art form based on indigenous Indian art. And this was almost the single-handed pressures of Sister Nivedita. The interesting part of the story is he used to tag Bose with him, with her, wherever he went. And one day, when Jagadish, Nandolal and Ashit Haldar had enough of this Ajanta and this their Marathi food, they decided to run away. And as they were coming down from Ajanta, they found a cart coming up. And in that cart, seated were Sister Nivedita, Lady Abala Bose and Jagadish Bose. She said, "Go back. We have brought a cook for you." So Nivedita's involvement is far beyond just, what shall I say, just the academic or or fixed relation. The only thing is that this Bhukti Prana's book, which wraps up all evidence and then makes it rock solid, is a little difficult to take in, because we need to take in the way it was. The way it was that her involvement with Bose's scientific work per se became intense during the stage he was working on plant response as a physiological investigation. That was the time she was involved, not only because she also felt that plants had life in them, but she was looking at it from the Vedantic point of view. And Vedanta is one intersection at which structural Hinduism and Brahmoism meet. So there are no problems about it. Nivedita kept on calling it our book. Shankari Prasad Basu is sympathetic, one of the few writers who are sympathetic. She said, number one, the discovery part is surely of Jagadish Chandra's. Number two, Nivedita played the role of inspirer and writer. No doubt about it. Number three, she drew most of the figures of the book. Number four, she took a leading role in its publication. Problem with scholars is they don't find publishers. You need somebody pushy enough to go and find a publisher, and she did it. Number five, she also played a prominent role in publicizing the book. So he rounds up the relationship in 5 compartments, where he says in 4 she was leading. And so according to Shankari Prasad Basu, who is a very respected writer, what a monumental work she did in 10 years by taking the significant role in writing, rewriting, and preparing the work of Jagadish Bose. Jagadish Chandra's first 4 books. Coming back to Abala Bose, when she wrote her article in Modern Review, she was very charitable to Sister Nivedita, but she never mentioned in one spot in any place that Nivedita helped her husband. That this is, Shankar Prasad and others feel, that this could have been a little more charitable. At no point did she mention in her Modern Review article. It is only when she died that, and Jagadish Bose comes up with what we call his admission that the tradition of believing, the tradition of accepting Nivedita as a non-scientific collaborator of Jagadish Bose has been established. As I told you, she enters first and remains a steadfast friend of Abala Bose. Abala Bose imbibes a lot of education of the Western models from her. And Abala Bose's period actually really begins, her most flashy, most successful phase of involvement in education begins from 1910 when Nivedita is almost gone, when she becomes secretary of the Brahmo Balika Vidyalaya. And all her experiments with Montessori and others would be after the departure of Nivedita. But she had been all around from the beginning till the end, around with Nivedita and Jagadish Bose. Rare is a woman of her caliber, her merit, who gave up medicine, the profession of medicine, to be with her husband, and was often overshadowed. But then she set up so many schools. I had counted 88. Now Paruldi told me it is more than that. Schools, not only primary schools, but also she set up at least 15 or 20 adult education centers, widow rehabilitation centers, art and crafts centers. So Abala Bose gets in the shade, but her contribution is as high. But wrapping up this discussion, I would say that here was a family that gave emotional support to a completely foreign lady who was in search for an identity and a cause. And here was a lady who gave her heart and soul to India and excelled in whatever she took up, excelled because she was extremely sincere. She may be a little over-expressive at times. She may be emphatic at times and intolerant at times, but these were all expressions of her utter sincerity. She was there. She was operating in the background of two titans, Rabindranath Tagore and Vivekananda, not seeing each other face to face. She was a bridge in many senses of the term. And where our topic is concerned, we have enough evidence to prove that she was intensely involved in the work of Jagadish Bose and helped her not only financially, about which we know, but also in every other form of assisting her. I only hope that at some stage, this amount of evidence is sharpened, is referenced. I can give enough materials if you want, and referenced and is added to the authoritative volume of on Jagadish Bose, at least by Bosu Vigyan Mandir. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharkar. Before we open up the floor for discussion, let me. It would be extremely nice if the last thing that you said, that you would be able to provide material and it should be recorded. It would be extremely beneficial if you yourself recorded this and the Indian National Science Academy actually publishes a Indian Journal for the History of Science, and that would be an appropriate, way to disseminate this information, this very important information that you narrated to us. So I would not only encourage you, but implore upon you that you write this up, and that will benefit the entire community. We would be extremely grateful if you did so. I know your time is limited, but still.
You see, Shiladitto Jana has already written about these gray aspects. Not only on this, he likes to chase these detective stories, as I put it. He has written in current science. I've relied on quite a bit on Shiladitya and Shankari Prasad. But if you just take Shiladitya Jana's paper in current science, I'll give you the reference as a basis and call him over. He should not be too old a man. I don't think. He is with, I think, IESR. We can
Right.
find out. And
Yes.
he has put his this thing, and wherever you need me to interject, I'm there. Because the whole
Okay.
idea that the truth must come out. It's not hagiography or pleasantry or ideology or snatching of idols and icons that's going on that we are interested in. We are interested in the truth and nothing but the truth.
True.
So
True.
sentimentalizing is not true. So,
True. Good. I do see one question, and I think it's directed to Chandrima. Chandrima, there's a question in the chat box that says it is generally technology that touches a common person's life. What may be done to make society realize the significance of basic science in their lives, directly or indirectly?
Well, that is why I mentioned about science communication, that it is the duty of the scientist to communicate to society via, appropriate medium about the importance of basic science and bring in the stories of the past that happened where the basic science was done at maybe 100 years ago or 50 years ago, and we are enjoying the benefits now. So it is to talking with the society and talking with people that how important it is to realize that scientists of the yesteryears have worked on their individual curiosities, but it is coming in use now. But there are also situations where now what basic science we are doing are also, I mean, in the last 50 years of molecular biology, if you look at it, now how useful it got in this pandemic. So I think it is the communication that will help.
So, Mr. Sharkar, we have a question for you, and this is from Professor Arun Lahiri Majumdar. He is asking, is there any evidence that Sister Nivedita had intellectual input to the idea of responses to the living and the non-living of Bose?
the letters don't reveal so much. But if we go through our letters of that period, 1904, 5, 6, you'll find from the huge volume, there was so much it will take a whole book to fill up. She was a prolific writer, and we'll find out from the letters that she had a fair inkling of what was going on, and she was trying to make it our research because her thing was first that she had provoked Bose, that she had noted down whatever she said, that it matched with her idea. And then, more than everything else, it got into that religious philosophy or philosophy per se, even without religion, of the Vedanta, that of all beings are connected in some way. But how much she got in would not be known because the manuscripts are all both. In fact, this Mukti Prana has hinted at what we call the classical style study. He said the classical style in which some of these literature, the works of Bose, later works have come out, are the sure signature of uh, Nivedita. And that could happen 120 years ago when expressions mattered as much as evidence. That would not be allowed. I would not be allowed to come to Parthapratima's work and even put a line on it. It's not possible. It was possible at that point. But there are Shankari Prasad writes, many others write that there is a definite reason to believe that where plant life is concerned and plant reactions are concerned, there have been healthy interactions between Bose and his non-scientific companion, Nivedita.
So there is another question for you, Mr. Sharkar. The question is from Pravir Bandyopadhyay, who says, could you please tell me what is the educational qualification of Professor Jagadish Bose?
Even that Shiladitya studied. He got his graduation from Kolkata and also from London. That is all I can say. And then he was awarded a doctoral later from London. Even then they didn't have such sharp qualifications as we have of that 3 years graduate, 4 years graduate, 2 years PG. It didn't happen like that those days. In all cases, his tripos was there, definitely, which was in addition to his graduation from Kolkata. These two we know for certain.
So, Mr. Bandyopadhyay is also requesting you, if you have not read so, to read The Voice of Life, the inaugural address of the Bose Institute delivered on November 30, 1917.
Yes. Yes, I had come across it long ago. Yes, I must.
All right, so I don't see any other questions on the chat box. So let me end this by before I end. I think Professor Parul Chakraborty would like to come over, but let me, on my own behalf, on behalf of the Jagadish Bose Trust, let me thank Mr. Johar Sharkar for a very informative talk and an eloquent talk, and so was the eloquence of my friend Chandrima Shaha, who actually talked about the relationship between science and society in such eloquent ways with wonderful examples. So thank you very much, Mr. Sharkar and Chandrima. Thank you very much. Chandrima, we owe you an extra amount of gratitude for making available to us the platform on which we are presenting today, which is really INSA's platform. The WebEx platform that we are using is INSA's WebEx. So thank you very much for making this happen and for facilitating this particular webinar. And we wish that we could actually meet in person, but we don't know when this is going to happen. But sooner than later, we will invite both Mr. Sharkar and Professor Chandrima Shaha to Acharya Bhavan, and we will have a cup of tea together. May I now request Professor Parul Chakraborty to end this webinar today. Parulji, are you there?
Yes.
Can you hear me? I'm here.
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Before I end the program, I have a special request to both the speakers. Can we have the manuscript of your lecture, please? We have a desire to publish what we are doing on the seminars at a later time when we find a good publisher. May I request both of you to give us the manuscript?
I'm not an academic, but I can.
But it's excellent. We cannot miss it, Mr. Sharkar. We cannot miss it. It will be a record. I have a chance to review a paper of Nivedita Jana, which INSA did not publish, but it was an excellent paper. I said, unearthing the contribution of Sister Nivedita in the matter of J.C. Bose's contribution, etc. It was an excellent paper. Sister Nivedita had studied in school botany, physics, all the science subjects, which is a very elaborate education. So she had the proper background, I think. Professor Shaha can again, unearth this question of this looking into the matter, as Mr. Sharkar pointed out. There are a lot of gaps and things. We want to younger generation or somebody may want to adjust those gaps, fill up those gaps. So I am requesting you, please, both of you, please, give us the manuscript if you can. Chandrima has excellent lecture educating us on the contribution of science and to society and science. So it will be excellent. Please. And now I request my colleague, Professor Bikash Chakravarti, to give a formal vote of thanks. Bikash, are you there? Hello, Bikash? Bikash was supposed to give formal vote of thanks on behalf of Scientific Question. Hello?
Hello.
You've unmuted him.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, because we can hear you. Please go ahead. Because please go ahead.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear.
Okay. Anyway, I mean, Professor Majumdar has already kind of thanked the speakers as well as INSA. I mean, we are extremely thankful to Professor Chandrima Shah by kind of indicating us how the synergy between science and society, I mean, is kind of fulfilling for both. I mean, how the society pays us back when the kind of necessary money is needed, and of course, science eventually is successful to give this. And she used the example of vaccine, I mean, research and also production here in the country. That's a recent story. And of course, in Jagadish's time, I mean, Professor Bose's time, it was wireless technology, which was and Professor Johar Sharkar showed how the social dynamics actually helps or contributes to the creation of science, and which is a different aspect. I mean, that time synergy and this one is different, but so it is science and society together. It doesn't really require always that for inspiration one needs the scientist alone, and it could be from people like Nivedita, which is and as I understand, I mean, Nivedita also perhaps contributed financially, I mean, arranged for finance for creation of the Bose Institute. And that also, I mean, is there, and some of the evidences are there. It's not yet clear how, I mean, maybe Professor Banerjee could tell us something later. And we are extremely thankful to INSA for helping us to arrange this meeting, excellent meeting, and the speakers and the participants. There were a few interesting questions, and other participants are there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You might be happy to note that a member from the audience has said that it was very enthralling and enlightening, totally captivating. So this is both to Mr. Sharkar and to Professor Shah. Thank you very much. So we leave the meeting now. We leave the webinar now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.